Hey traders, welcome back to the FX YouTube channel. Price action remains choppy so far in September. We didn't get a bigger pullback like I was thinking we may get, and all the divergence that we had on the weekly is gone now. This should make trading a little easier unless we get a big pullback now after we had that major break. And next week, I'm not expecting things to get any easier for us. Reason being, we got some major news coming, which could cause a lot of havoc on the markets. So today, I'll start with the news, then do the top-down analysis, and then a quick review. So let's start with the news first. So looking at the red folder news that we have next week, we have CPI for the UK on Wednesday. We have the interest rate announcements for the US on Wednesday as well. And we have unemployment claims for the US on Thursday. And then on Friday, we have PMI for the Eurozone. And then we have PMI for the UK. And we also have PMI for the US later on in the day. So you can see we have quite a bit of important news coming next week. But the most important one that I'm keeping my eye on is FOMC interest rates. It says 3 a.m. on Thursday for my time, but that is, I believe, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in New York. This one, I'm expecting a lot of volatility in the markets. And because of that, I'm a little indecisive on where price may go next week. Mainly because we have so much news and we did take a lot of liquidity. We broke structure, so potentially it could trigger a bigger pullback or potentially a reversal, short-term reversal. But it's not really what I'm guessing right now, looking at the way the price action is moving. But like I said, I'm going to be really cautious trading next week and probably may not even trade the latter half of next week because of all the high impact news that we have. So let's move to the charts next, starting with EU on the monthly time frame. So you can see on EU we are bearish. We've pushed down really deep, and thereafter we had a significant pullback. We pulled back into the monthly breaker block, and then you can also see we've tapped the OTE level before reacting really strongly. You can see that with the wick on the top, and then thereafter we've had continuation with these two bearish candles to the downside. Structure wise, it would make sense if we continue to the downside and targeted this fair value gap. And then if we look at DXY on the monthly time frame, so more or less the inverse of what we're seeing on EU. So heavily bullish on DXY, and thereafter we had a significant pullback. Like EU, we've come into the monthly breaker block. We nearly filled the monthly fair value gap, nearly came into OTE before having a huge reaction. Again, you can see that with a huge wick that we have on that monthly candle. And then two bullish candles thereafter, showing continuation to the upside. And since last week's video, you can see we've pushed higher. And my expectation now is continuation to the upside, targeting the buy side liquidity, as well as the monthly fair value gap. Continuing on, let's go back to EU on the weekly time frame now. So there's a significant change on the weekly time frame. So before I was showing you we had some divergence. We don't have that anymore. Last week's candle, you can see it came down quite deep. It actually broke the low. So we are now bearish on the weekly time frame. The only problem is we didn't close below the low. We did close below the body, but I'd like to see continuation and closure below this previous low, just so that we have that confirmation that yes, we are indeed bearish now. But my expectation now is continuation to the downside, targeting this sell side liquidity. But as I mentioned before during the news, we did take a significant level. There is some potential that we start to see a pullback now. But looking at the way price is moving, my guess is we'll continue to the downside and reach for the sell side liquidity first. And then if we go on DXY on the weekly time frame, so you can see we clearly shifted bullish on the weekly time frame with 2 candles closing above the previous high. This last week's candle, you can see we had a huge wick to the downside. We actually came into the daily fair value gap, which you'll see on the daily time frame in a minute, and thereafter we aggressively pushed to the upside on Thursday. That push up was heavily influenced by news, but it was quite interesting because we also had the interest rate announcements for EU, but honestly it didn't do anything. The strength of the dollar just completely overpowered the interest rate announcements from the ECB. But now that we had this huge wick on the downside, this looks like really bullish. I'm guessing that we just continue up and target this buy side liquidity next, because we already broke the weekly structure, and we didn't have a significant pullback after that candle. We just had a small pullback to fill the daily fair value gap, and thereafter just continue to the upside with this strong bullish candle. Strong bullish as in we pulled back, rejected, and pushed up significantly higher, and that's why I think we'll just see continuation moving forward. And if we go to EU on the daily time frame, so on the daily time frame, the week started here. We had a bullish candle to start the week, and then we had a lot of sloppy price action for the next couple days. But essentially what we did is we more or less filled the daily fair value gap before starting to push down. We had one last pullback, retesting supply, and thereafter a huge drop on Thursday, and this was the drop that broke the lows right here. So this created a lower low, but it also broke a weekly structure as well. And on Friday, we played around a lot. My expectation now is we have an open daily fair value gap. I'm guessing that we'll target this daily fair value gap before we see continuation to the downside now. And then if we look at DXY on the daily time frame, so this was Friday, and then on Monday, so this was the start of the week. You can see we had an aggressive push to the downside coming into the daily fair value gap. Again, a lot of choppy price action the next 2 days, but essentially we did give some signs of strength after coming into the daily fair value gap. Came back, testing demand, pushed up some more, and then on Thursday came back one more time before aggressively pushing to the upside. And then on Friday you can see we're just more or less playing around, but we do have an open daily fair value gap on DXY as well. I can imagine that getting filled before continuing to the upside now. So let's go back to Euro on the hourly time frame, and I started doing something on EU. I've been plotting the highs and lows of the week, giving a little more clarity how price is moving, where it's moving to before the next moves. And you can see essentially all we've been doing is having some pullbacks, mainly into inefficient pricing before continuing further to the downside. We did have 2 weeks in this drive down where we finished the week more bullish than bearish. So here we came up, broke the previous week's high before coming further down the next week. And this week right here, the same thing. We created the low of the week on Tuesday, pushed up, broke the highs of the previous week before having an aggressive push to the downside, creating a lower low the week after. So if we look at what happened this week, so we started the week with a gap. So we gapped up when the markets opened on Monday. We did pull back a little before pushing to the upside. We had one last pullback, retesting demand. This was right at New York Open. And then after that, aggressively pushed to the upside. And then you can see we consolidated in this area. And then at right after Japan Open, we aggressively pushed to the upside, creating this high of the week before aggressively pushing to the downside. And at this moment, this is where we actually created the shift. So we created a clear shift here, giving our first signs that it's very likely that it's going to turn around. The only problem is we came up so deep, giving a little false impression that it may continue to the upside from here. But no, this high held, and then we continue to push up. I think this was news. We wicked down and then wicked up, again mitigating the highs before pushing lower. And then again, this is all choppy, messy price action, but essentially it's just building liquidity before the final push to the downside. And again, this was news related. I believe we had I think the ECB announcement was on this candle. So then the ECB announcement, I believe, initially pushed price up, but then the US news drove the price down really aggressively, breaking daily structure, and then having a little pullback. It's like a 30 pip pullback, before eventually pushing lower to the downside, eventually breaking the weekly structure point. And then after the break of the weekly structure, that's where we started to consolidate before starting to push up. And this push up created the daily fair value gap. We pulled back since, and my guess is we'll probably retest demand. Maybe on Monday, and then eventually come into this daily fair value gap, creating the high of the week, and then after continuing further to the downside. But the only problem is we have all that news, and news is mainly just there to move price. As we've already broken a significant structure level, for all we know, we may get a bigger push to the upside following the news. So that's why I'm going to be really cautious trading the news. I probably won't trade the latter half of the week, and just focus on my bias here see if I can get into a long to come into the daily fair value gap, and then if we get into the daily fair value gap, look for shorting opportunities to take the price down. And if we break the lows, great, because that's what I'll be targeting. If we don't get down there anytime close to what was it, Wednesday night, where the interest rates are announced, I'll just close the trade, and then just see what happens after all the news at the end of the week, and then come back on the charts either at the end of the week. But end of the week is going to be quite tough with all the PMI. Yeah, I'm just looking again. Yeah, Wednesday is the interest rates, and then Thursday jobless claims, and then Friday, yeah, all the PMI announcements. Yeah, so it's going to be really heavy news, and something I probably won't be able to trust so much. We already had a major move last week. I'm not sure what the news is going to do next week. It just may be like huge consolidation, whipsaws in a major range before actually seeing the next direction, whether it's continuation or pullback. Okay, there is one thing I wanted to note on this hourly chart is this candle that I've noted with an arrow, because it's quite significant. It actually kind of screwed things up in terms of my bias when this happened, and I'll show you why on DXY. So just going to that candle first. So this is the same time that bullish EU candle with that huge wick happened. So just one more time going back, you can see this candle created the high of the week, but if we look on DXY, it didn't come back and break the lows. So essentially what was happening is DXY was giving the direction for the majors the whole time. So this high was created when DXY didn't break the lows, but DXY actually had a lot cleaner structure, giving the direction the entire week. And honestly, I wasn't looking at DXY so close, so I got a little screwed up at times because I was looking more at looking more for longs than I was shorts, when I should have been the other way around if I would have focused more on DXY. But anyways, just a quick review on DXY. So this up here is the opening candle for DXY. You can see we had a huge gap down, and then after that gap down, we didn't really even see much of a pullback. Well, actually, this candle right here is a pullback because we opened up way down here. So we pulled back on this candle, and thereafter just continued to the downside, and we had a pullback. When was this? This was at London session. So we had the pullback on London session, and then New York pushed the price right back down. And the low of the week on DXY was actually created on Monday. So on EU, the low of the week was created on Tuesday during the Japan Open candle. But as you can see, the low of the week was created on Monday, and that particular candle that drove EU up, it didn't create a lower low on DXY, and thereafter this was just manipulation, and aggressively started to push price up again. And this was the first sign right here that we were shifting bullish. So we broke structure on the 1 hour time frame on DXY, and then we came back for a deep pullback. This down manipulation candle that I mentioned before, it actually held, and thereafter continued further to the upside. This was actually news, and that's why we had that huge whipsaw. But even this didn't come back down and create any lower lows. You can see we have a demand chain that's forming and holding all along. You don't see lower lows created. So this was the low of the week. Then this low was the next low, and then all the pullbacks after came just from mitigation. And then this low was the next one to hold as we broke structure again. You can see it didn't come down and break that low or manipulate that low. We were mostly consolidating for the latter half of Wednesday into Thursday, but again the lows are holding, and thereafter we started to have the push up, that last pullback after the ECB interest rate announcement. And then when we had the New York Open and the news thereafter, aggressively pushed price to the upside. And like I said, it had a huge whipsaw here where it was just doing some mitigation before continuing to the upside, breaking all kinds of structure. And then on Friday we just had a pullback. You can see we had an aggressive pullback. I think this may have been news as well. The huge wick would signify aggressive manipulation before pushing back to the upside. And this area right now is just consolidation. But now that we do have this daily fair value gap created, I'd like to see price to come back into there, and maybe even a little lower, sweeping that liquidity that we have there as well, right on this candle, before continuing to the upside. So yeah, it's quite interesting to see how DXY was driving the direction on EU all along. And if you focus more on DXY, a lot of times you're going to have a little more clarity on the real intention of the market, because on EU we didn't have anything clean like this. So Euro had quite a bit of relative strength compared to the dollar, and because of that it was giving a lot of false readings. So like here, when we created that manipulation high, where DXY didn't go down lower than this candle high, and the driving up on EU giving a false sense that EU may push up higher, whereas DXY wasn't doing anything like that. It was creating higher highs, while EU was failing to create lower lows. So as I was saying, if you focused on the price action that was presented on DXY, you would had a much clearer direction of where the market wanted to go, because EU didn't show that at all. It just gave a lot of confusion on which direction the price was going. The only clear thing that EU showed is this break right here. This break right here was actually the one that signified that it's going lower, and all these aggressive pushes to the upside were just fake outs, manipulation, mitigation, just coming back to the highs before pushing lower and lower. Eventually, when we had that news, the ECB news that pushed it up initially, and then the US news that just caused EU to plummet. So as I was saying, EU is really bearish right now. Let's just go back on the daily time frame. So you can see we're creating lower lows. We broke the weekly low. My guess is, like I said before, we'll probably come into this daily fair value gap before pushing further to the downside. But to be completely honest, I just don't have a strong sense that that is in fact what's going to happen. It's more likely to happen, but because of the news that we have, I mean, anything can happen, to be honest. If I remember correctly, the projected, oh actually I can go back, the projected rate increase is nothing, it's flat. That could be a huge disappointment, which could trigger DXY just to drop. And obviously if DXY drops, then EU is going to push up. So there's a lot of uncertainty coming into next week. I'm just going to focus on trying to catch this trade. Price to pull back into the daily fair value gap, and if we get a short setup there, take the price down, and then later on in the week, when news comes around, just close the trade and then see what happens next. Anyways, that sums up this weekend's analysis. I mentioned in the previous videos that I was planning on transitioning back to Black Swan YouTube channel instead. There's still a few things that we're working on before we move in that direction, and until we get those things sorted out, I'll continue here. Well, anyways, that's it for me. I hope you guys found value in this video. I'll try to post some videos if I see anything interesting next week, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace. Hey, you made it to the very end. Thanks for that. If you could do me one more favor and click the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, it'll allow the YouTube algos to kick in and help this channel grow. Thanks again. Cheers.